Hello and welcome to my very first tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to create this little floating juice box using Blender's Grease Pencil tool only from start to finish. I'm going to show you the amazing drawing tool and also the amazing palette tool. I'm going to show you how to move in 3D space while drawing and how to animate your drawing using traditional 2D techniques mixed with 3D motion for your objects and for the camera. So let's begin. First, the version I use here is Blender 2.82, and I'm going to show you a glimpse of the potential of Grease Pencil. Because this tool is in constant evolution, we cannot cover everything in the first tutorial. There are enhancements and new features that are going to come in the few weeks or months, and some are already available now. But today I'm going to show you the most simple drawing and 2D animation tools that can help you make complex animations once you understand them. This tutorial is intended for both complete beginners in Blender and also for people who already know how to animate with Blender but are new in Grease Pencil. So if you're already familiar with the interface of Blender, if you know how to create objects, how to navigate, how to move things, you can skip to the timecode shown below. For the new users, let's start. The first tip that I'm going to give you is the most important one, is that Blender is really well documented. So when you hover the mouse over any button or any menu, you can see the name of this button appearing in the tooltip, and you see a short description of what it does, and you can just type that description on the internet to learn more about it. So what is this? Where am I? Why is there a 3D cube here? What is the purpose of my life? Well, this cube is one of the default contents that Blender adds when you create an empty scene. You can manipulate it by clicking on it here, or you can click on it in the list of objects here that we call the outliner. The outliner shows all the objects available in your scene. And below that outliner, in this other panel here, you have the parameters of the whole scene, like the export format and dimensions, the parameters of the world and the environment, like the background colors and things like that. And below that panel, you see here there is a little separation between the buttons. All the buttons that are below this panel are for the parameters of the currently selected object. So if you click on a different object, the content of these last panels will change. Now, how to navigate in space? If you drag the mouse in this little sphere, you rotate the viewport. If you drag in this magnifier, you can zoom out and zoom in. On this hand, you can slide left, right, and on this, you go inside the active camera. This camera is actually the point of view from where your image is going to be exported. When you click on render here, you export the image that is seen from the camera here, and you can save it as an image or a video file on your computer. The next very important thing that you must understand on Blender is the 3D cursor. It's that icon here that looks like a ring boy. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like a second mouse, but you can move it in the 3D space, unlike the normal mouse that can only move on the 2D space of your screen. To move this 3D cursor, you just have to press Shift and right-click in the scene at a place where you want to put it. And of course, when we move it from this point of view, we don't see exactly where it is, we don't see the distance. So I will show you later how to move it with a more precise distance. So let's suppose that the 3D cursor is here and we create an object with add, meshes, whatever in this list. We've created a cone and you see that this cone is exactly where I left the 3D cursor. So this is one of the uses of the 3D cursor. It lets you decide where is going to appear the next thing that you'll create. And another example, suppose that you create a drawing. Well, let's suppose that this thing is a drawing. It has a shape of a thin donut, but let's imagine that it's a drawing and that it has a complex shape like this, for example. So later, if you rotate your drawing, you will see that the rotation happens around the 3D cursor. Actually, before you start your drawing, it's important that you place the 3D cursor at a point that will be the center of your drawing. Even if you don't have a clear idea of your drawing, you must at least know where should be the center. And in the end, if your drawing doesn't look like what you expected, you can still move the 3D cursor and change the center of your drawing at that new place. To start a drawing on Blender, we have two ways to do it. The first way is to just click on File, New, 2D animation, and there you have a white canvas and can already draw on it. If you rotate the camera, you can see that you're actually in a 3D space, and up there in the outliner you see that there's a grease pencil object that has been created. In the parameters of its object, down here, you have layers and colors pre-configured. This is the first way. The second way is to start from scratch. This is the way I'm going to show you, because at some point you'll have to go back here and you'll have to know how to recreate the canvas, the layers and the color palette. So I'm going to show you this. First, I'm going to clean my workspace by removing some tabs up there. I'm going to remove all the tabs except layout and animation. So I right click on the other tabs and press delete all these ones. Don't worry, if you remove the wrong tab, you can press plus and find it again in this list. These tabs contain actually the same content that you see here, but with a different display and different tools. Each of them is optimized for a specific task, and for now we just need the layout and animation tab and another one that we'll add later. We are now going to configure our pen tablet to draw and navigate on Blender. Most of you know that on Blender, normally you need the middle button on the mouse to navigate, to rotate and pan the camera without having to click up there. So we are going to change the configuration of Blender to emulate this middle mouse button with a pen. To do so, we just need to go to Edit, Preferences and go to the Input tab. And here we click on Emulate 3-button mouse. In the menu under this, in the drop-down, just keep Alt as the modifier. And this means that when you hold the Alt key and click on the screen with your mouse or with your pen, the software will believe that you are using the middle mouse button. Those of you that are familiar with modeling in Blender know that the Alt key is needed for the loop selection, so if you activate this option here, you'll have to edit your shortcut for the loop selection tool. In my case, I'll also activate the Emulate Numpad option, because I use a laptop and I don't have a numeric keyboard on the right. The numpad buttons are used as shortcuts to change the point of view quickly in the 3D viewport, and if you don't have that, you just need to click here on Emulate Numpad, so you can use the top buttons on your laptop as shortcuts. Now to use the pen, if you hold the Alt key and drag in the viewport, you rotate the view around the currently selected object. If you hold Alt plus Shift and drag, you move the camera on the side. If you hold Alt plus Control and drag the mouse, you zoom in and out the view. These are the main shortcuts to navigate. To create your drawing, first check that you are in object mode in this drop-down, and then click on Add, Grease Pencil, Blank. Grease Pencil is the name of a drawing object in Blender. So the grease pencil object has been created at the place where I left the 3D cursor. It's here in the center. We don't see it because it's an empty drawing for now. And now go to the outliner up there and open the object with this little arrow here. You see there is the name of the object duplicated on 2 levels. You can double click on each of them to change their name. All the items in the outliner are organized like this for now. You have this nested item here. And in our case, the green one is the name that you will find later in the 2D animation part. So you have to rename the 2 items. In our case, we'll name them box and box. Now click on the plus button near the tabs up there and choose 2D animation. 2D animation. A new tab has appeared. You see here, a new menu has also appeared. It's the drawing tools. So don't be confused by the way how it appeared suddenly. This menu is actually available only because we are in a grease pencil object now. If you go out of the grease pencil object, even if you're in the 2D animation tab, this menu will disappear. By the way, to go out of your drawing and edit another object, you must switch from draw mode to object mode, and then you can click on the other object. This is because when you draw on Blender, you can click on different objects that are not drawings, but you don't want to quit the draw mode, so that's why Blender keeps you inside the draw mode, unless you specify that you want to go out by switching this menu to object mode and then click on another object. Also, if you want to switch from a drawing to another drawing, you must first go to object mode too, and then you can click on the other drawing and then switch back to draw mode. The draw mode is only available if you have selected a drawing object. Now let's configure the dimensions of our exported animation. If you press on 0 on the numpad, you switch to camera view to see a preview of the exported image. So here we see that we have a panoramic image, but in this case we want a square image to put it on our social networks. So you can click here on this printer icon and change the dimensions to 1920 for both X and Y resolution. And we are going to change the background color of our drawing, so we go to this word icon here and click under background color and change the color. If you don't see your color appearing in the viewport here, it means that you're probably in one of the display modes up there of the viewport, which are wireframe mode, solid mode, or material preview mode. So you just need to click on the last icon here. This one is the render preview mode. And now you see that the color on the viewport is slightly different than the color that you picked in the right panel. That is because on Blender, the default export colors are adapted to make a more photorealistic or filmic render. But here we are doing a non-realistic drawing, so to change that you go to this little camera icon, and under the color management section you switch the display mode from filmic to standard. And then you see the actual color that you picked. Okay, that flashy yellow was just for the example, but I'm going to put a more pale color for this tutorial. Yes, you know, in the end I'm going to change this to blue, but I will keep this bright pale yellow for now. Let's make little doodles now to get familiar with the tool. So here we are in the grease pencil object, okay? We are in a draw mode. We go in this panel here that looks like a green spaghetti, and here you can create the layers of your drawing. So click on new layer and double click on the new layer to rename it. Then to create your color palette, go to the material panel in this button here that looks like a sphere with a checker texture, and here just click on new to add a new color and double click to rename it. I usually name my first color line art because this will be the color of the main lines that I'm going to draw. Down here you can change the color of the stroke and fill, but I will show this to you later. Let's leave this to black. Now back to the layers. Okay, I'm in the right layer because I only have one anyway. Let's start with non-animated doodles. I'll show you the animation part later. To go out of this preview frame, I'm just going to rotate the camera slightly, and I'm also going to remove the grids and overlays by clicking on this overlay button here. Now that all the settings are done, you can draw here with the pen, and be careful to stay in the same frame in the timeline here below, because if you accidentally move in the timeline with the mouse or by pressing the space button, which is the shortcut to play the animation, and if you try to continue an existing drawing from here, you see all the previous lines disappearing suddenly. This is because Blender creates automatically new keyframes when you move in the time and draw. So this feature is for the animation. If you accidentally created new keyframes, just go back to your first keyframe and select the other ones by dragging here and press X to delete. Let's draw this little fruit. Here you can change the width of your brush, and this button toggles on and off the pen pressure. On the next input you can change the strength of your pen. The strength is actually the opacity of your brush, and you can also toggle on and off the pressure for this part. In the advanced drop-down, you can configure the way how the software records your strokes. It will depend on your computer settings, but in my case it seems better when I set the input samples to 1 and the active smooth to 0.3. Let's put the width to around 25 pixels and continue our doodle. I've drawn this little fruit here. Now if I rotate the camera and then draw something else here, you see that the two drawings are oriented in different directions. To understand what happened, we are going to reveal the invisible canvas behind the drawing. I'm going to activate the overlays here, but with more options in this drop-down, I checked the canvas option. Now we see a new grid on the center. This is the canvas. It's the invisible plane on which we were actually drawing. I'll just remove the floor from the overlay options so we can see the canvas better. Now the canvas is in the center of the scene and is facing us. Its position and orientation are actually ruled by the two drop-downs up there. The settings you should have per default are origin for the position and view for the orientation. When you have this setting, the canvas will always stay at the global center of the scene and will always face the view, which means yourself. If you draw little arrows in the corner of the canvas and then rotate the camera, you see the arrows stay exactly where the canvas was oriented before, while the canvas is rotating with us. If we draw again now, our new lines are now aligned with the new current view. I'm gonna change the orientation rule to front and the canvas rotates to the front, obviously. Here, if I draw a horizon, you notice that I can go outside the grid. So although you just see this little grid here for the canvas, actually it's stretching to the whole space on the sides and the top and the bottom. So now you understand how this works. If you switch this to top, the grid faces the top, so you can draw something on the floor like this road, for example. And same rule for the side orientation, you can draw something standing over the floor. Okay, it looks nice, but what if you want to draw the same thing but not from the center of the scene now? Well, that's when we need the 3D cursor. In the first drop down here, let's switch the origin option to 3D cursor. If you don't see the 3D cursor on the screen, you have to activate it in the overlays. So up there, check that the overlays are activated, of course, and then in the drop down, check the 3D cursor option. Now you can shift right click in the scene to move the 3D cursor and the canvas moves with it. You can now draw like we did before, but from different places. By the way, you see that to move the cursor, I'm clicking randomly in my perspective view and I assume the cursor is moving from left to right, but I have no idea of the distance from my view to the cursor. Maybe it's not even aligned to the floor, so a better way to move the cursor with more precision is to not be in perspective view. If I press numpad 1, my view is switched to the front and all the perspective have disappeared. So now, in this view, I can see all the objects nicely aligned from the front in an orthographic space and I see my 3D cursor between the objects. I can precisely move the cursor with shift right clicking on the screen and I can place it precisely, for example, in the center of the tree here. And remember to navigate on the orthographic view without rotating the camera. You must hold Alt plus Shift and drag on the screen with your pen. If you use Alt plus the pen, you rotate the camera so you get out of the orthographic view. You have to press numpad 1 again to go back here. When I've done placing the cursor, I just rotate the camera to see the result in perspective. The canvas is indeed aligned with the tree, but well, it's just aligned from the front view and not from the side. But remember, the width of the canvas is infinite, so I can complete the side of a tree from this view. This technique also works to move the cursor up and down. You can press numpad 1, then shift right click to place the 3D cursor at the top or bottom. In my case, I'll put it up there. Okay, now I go back to perspective, I rotate the camera, and I'm gonna change the orientation of the canvas to top. And here you can draw little clouds. Of course, numpad 1 is just one of the available orthographic views. We can also press numpad 3, and here we are on the side with an orthographic view also. And if you shift right click somewhere in the horizon from here to the left or to the right, we are actually moving the 3D cursor to the front or to the background because we see it from the side. I'm gonna place the 3D cursor, let's say, on this car. Now I rotate to see in perspective and I see that they are aligned on the side, on the y-axis, but not on the front, the x-axis. So I press again numpad 1 and I align it on the car from this view. I go back to perspective and now it seems okay. So you see, I had to check the position from the side and from the front view with numpad 1 and numpad 3 to be sure that I was indeed in the center of the place where I wanted to be. Now I can change the orientation of the canvas to front, and here I can draw some guy going up in the car. Short off-topic stuff now, it's not needed for today's artwork, but it's a very cool thing to know. In the first drop down here, if you choose surface, you can draw over the surface of 3D objects with your pen. Of course, you need 3D objects on the scene to draw on, so luckily we have this cube here. In this version of Blender, when you draw on an object like this, the lines are actually half inside the object and half outside. To change this, you must adjust the offset. It's in this little input that appears in the drop-down when we selected surface mode. The offset is the distance from the surface to the pen. Most of the time I put it between 0.1 and 0.3. Let's test 0.1 here. Not quite good, so this time let's try 0.3. And it's better now, the lines are more visible. The optimal value of the offset depends on the size of your brush. The thicker the brush and the bigger the offset. You can also exaggerate the offset value if you want to put a really big gap between the surface and the lines. Here is what happens with a bigger offset. Okay, this was just to show you this cool option, but today we don't even need to draw on 3D objects. We are going to build a whole 3D animated drawing using the pen only. Now let's draw our juice box. I'm going to remove this cube. First, I must go out of my drawing, so I switch to object mode. Then I can click on the cube and I press X to delete it. I can now reselect my drawing in the outliner here because it's still empty and I can't click on the scene to find it. To put the 3D cursor back to the center of the drawing, I press Shift S and select Cursor to Selected. The cursor is now back to the center. It's in the place where it was when I added the grease pencil object. I can now switch back to draw mode. There we have different types of pen. I will choose the standard pen, and for my usual art style, I deactivate the pen pressure for both radius and strength. At the top center, I check that the settings are on 3D cursor / front. I can now start to draw the face of the box. Here we go. It's not perfect. I could redraw them, but I'm gonna show you a new tool instead. Switch to sculpt mode in the drop-down. Now there's a bunch of new tools on the left. You can try them all on the lines of your drawing. In this case, I'm gonna pick this one, the grab tool. This allows you to grab pieces of a drawing and move them smoothly. You can change the width of your tool by pressing F and moving the mouse to the side. Click to confirm, and now you can grab the drawing with a bigger brush. The F shortcut works to resize all kinds of tools when you're drawing. You can use it for the pen, for the eraser and other tools. I go back to draw mode now. We have tools down here to draw shapes like circles and rectangles, but for my case I prefer to keep some handmade style to the drawing, so I won't use these tools for now. Let's draw a circle. It almost looked good for once. Well, back to sculpt mode, I take the grab tool to fix the shape. I think I'm going to rename this layer to face lines, and I'll add a new layer that I will call stars lines. I want to separate these two elements in two different layers because I'm going to animate them separately in different loops. Actually, all of them will have two layers for each element. Each will have a layer for the lines and a layer for the colors. So now in draw mode, let's draw stars and little decorations here. And again, let's add another layer. I rename it background. I move it to the bottom of the layers list. You can use these arrows here to sort the layers. Let's draw in this background layer now. I'm drawing little peels. You see that the peel at the right side is not correctly aligned with the rest. I can deform it with the sculpt tool, but that will be hard to keep its shape clean, so a new tool now. For this, I'm gonna switch to edit mode here. I'm gonna lock the layers I don't use. I can even hide them. I click on the selection tool, and in the next panel I pick the lasso mode. So now I can drag to select around the peel and I press R for rotation. I can rotate the object, and the rotation is clear from here because we're on an orthographic view. If you do this while you're in perspective view, the rotation will happen in the axis of your current view and it can be hard to be sure what you're doing. So when you're on perspective view, you can rotate with the R key and then press Y to constrain the rotation to the Y-axis, so it's rotating as if you were manipulating it from the front. Or you can also go back to the front view with numpad 1, and now in orthographic view you just need to press R to rotate. So now everything is aligned. Just need some small adjustment here in sculpt mode. I'm going to adjust this, and now we're okay. I'm going to create another layer for the borders of a box. I call it box lines, and I move it at the bottom of all the layers. And in this layer, I'm going to draw the borders of the front face of our juice box. Now I'm going to show you another new tool. You see on the corners of this box, there are some overlapping lines that we would want to erase. So we can erase them with the eraser. You have the soft eraser, You have the hard eraser and the point eraser that both erase in a more sharp way. And you have the stroke eraser that erases the whole line as long as you just touch a piece of it. But still, it's hard to erase exactly the overlapping lines without breaking the corners. So we have another tool for this. It's this scissors icon here. It allows you to cut the overlapping lines by just selecting them. So here, I can just remove this part here, and same here, and same here. Sometimes this tool won't work in the way you expect. Actually, on Blender, all the lines that you draw are recorded in points based on the movement of your pen. When you're in edit mode and you select the lines, you can see the points. If you select a group of points, up here in the edit mode menu, in strokes, you can increase or decrease the number of points in the selected area. If you click simplify, some in-between points are removed. This can be useful if you want to optimize your file or to stylize your drawing by creating more straight lines. But if you don't have enough points, in sculpt mode, if you drag your lines, you see some hard edges because there isn't enough data to make smooth curves. To add more points, back in edit mode, you select the zone, and up in the menu there under stroke, you can just click on subdivide. It adds some in-between points between the points you selected. You can redo the subdivide action as many times as needed till you think you have enough points to create a smooth curve. So now back in sculpt mode, you can grab the lines and see the movement is smoother. You can also use this first tool in the list to polish the curves, and now we have something really smooth. So these rules of points applies to the scissors tool too. The tool needs these points to detect correctly the intersections and to erase correctly the overlapping lines. Now I'm gonna clean the rest of the corners. And remember, this software is in constant evolution, so all these tools are going to be enhanced. Now let's add some colors. I add a layer here. I rename it to box color. I move it down with the arrows. To create our colors, let's switch to the materials panel in the red round checker here. We click on plus to add a slot. Down here you have this gray sphere. It's a button to import the colors you already created in another grease pencil object on the scene. We just click on new because for now this is the only grease pencil object in the scene. And here we can add a new color. So here we uncheck stroke. We don't need the stroke color for this. We'll activate fill. And now we pick a color for the fill color. Double click to rename. I will rename this to medium. I don't usually name my materials with names like blue or purple of whatever color because later I might change the stroke color or the fill color and I don't want to have to rename it again, so I give them names like bright, dark, or wood, metal, sand, whatever. And you can find your own rules, or you can also name it blue and pink if you want. Now I think I will start with another color for this box. I'll save this blue for later. For now, I'll create a new color. I press plus again, new, and I rename this to medium 2. Again, any name you like. We uncheck the strokes color and activate the fill, and we pick a color. Now back to layers. You are in the color layers. Under the lines layers, you're in draw mode. You can select the paint bucket tool and click in the shape to paint it. Now beware, when you use the paint tool, like with the pen tool, you have the rules for the canvas at the top of the view, so you must be sure when you paint that the position and the orientation of your canvas are the same as when you were drawing the line art. Suppose the drawing was made in the front orientation, but later for some reason you have switched it to side. Now you paint in the shape and it seems that it's filled correctly, but now if you rotate, you see it's actually drawn on a perpendicular plane on the side view. It just looked right from your view, but it was an illusion. So beware to always check the position and orientation of the canvas when you draw and when you paint. Okay, now just a little adjustment in the palette. I think I will make this slightly brighter and I will create a new color. Plus, new, uncheck stroke, check fill option, pick a color. And now another color. Well, let's do them all while we are here. Just create 5 or 6 colors of your choice. Back to the layers. I add a new layer for the colors of these peels in the background. I hide the unused layers because the paint bucket tools checks all the visible layers when we paint. Another tip, You can access to your palettes in the top menu here when you're drawing, so it's faster than going to the materials panel at the bottom. I'm now going to paint the half of the pill, and oops, the whole pill was painted. That's because there's a gap in the middle. To solve this, you can configure the way how the tool detects the gaps. You can also go back to the line art layer and complete the lines, but there are two faster ways. The first way, you can use the pen tool to paint. When you switch to pen, you can draw with the same color that you used for the bucket tool. So here, you just need to draw precisely the shape of the thing that you want to color. And the second way, even faster, without leaving the paint bucket, if you hold the control key while painting, your paint bucket actually behaves like a pen. So you can draw the whole shape, or you can just draw to fill the gaps. And when it's done, you just release the control key and just click to paint the rest in normal paint mode. Let's now paint the rest of the background. And now we're going to add a new layer for the colors under the stars, and also a layer under the face for the colors of the face. Now another important tip: when you want to color a drawing like this face, in this version of Blender, I don't know if it will change later, but when you have shapes inside of other shapes and you paint the biggest shape, the color covers everything inside. The inner shapes are not taken in consideration, so you have to start by painting the biggest shapes first and then paint the smaller ones inside, so that the latest thing that you color go over the previous one. Another way would be to create separate layers for the color of the inner shapes, but it will take a lot of time. And we have done the first side of your juice box. We can go to the next step. We're going to add some volume to our artwork. We're going to draw on different places in space now, so we press numpad 3 again to switch to the side, and we move the 3D cursor to the front with shift right click here. The front is on the left from here. Now we rotate to check the perspective, and the 3D cursor is floating in the front. Everything's okay. This is where we're going to draw some floating elements in front of the box. Let's create a new layer for the line art of this part. I rename this floating lines. We lock the other layers so that we don't edit them accidentally. Now we select the line art color in the materials list, and we can draw. And what happens? I made a mistake. Look on the left, I was still in the paint bucket tool. If we zoom out, we see this big rectangle that appears on the side. It's because I just painted the whole frame with the bucket tool using the line art color. I'm gonna erase this and go back to the pen tool. Numpad 1 to switch to front. Now let's draw some new stuff in this new canvas position. Checking the perspective again, okay. Let's add a layer now for the colors underneath the line art layer. I'll name this Floating Lines Colors. Now to paint these lines, we must know that even if you are on a different place in space, all the lines in the grease pencil object are taken in consideration for the paint bucket tool, so we need to hide the other layers to paint here. Or we can try to rotate our camera at an angle where the shapes we want to paint don't have any other lines crossing behind it. Like here, for example, from this view, this cube is away from the other lines, so I can apply securely the paint bucket on it. We can do this for the other elements when possible, or just hide the other layers. Our drawing is starting to be more and more complex. Some lines are closer to the camera, some are further in the background, and later, to edit these lines, we don't want to have to switch to side again and move the 3D cursor and switch to front and draw and move to side and move the 3D cursor. It will be too long. So here are 2 tips to move in an easier way in space when your drawing starts to be more complex. The first thing, you already know it, you can press Shift S and select Cursor to Selected when you're in your grease pencil object. The cursor and the canvas go back to the center or the origin of your drawing. It's the place where you started to draw, so at least this part of the box is easy to access. The second thing to know now is that if we find a way to move the 3D cursor at the places where we've already put it before, we would gain a lot of time. So there are plugins or add-ons on Blender to do that, but I didn't find the right one yet. So the trick I found is to place little cubes on the scene, and I will show you how to use them as helpers. we must go out of the drawing by switching to Object Mode. Now select Add Meshes Cube, and while the new cube is selected, press S to resize it and drag the mouse to get this size approximately. We're going to place this cube at the same depth as our floating lines. So press G to grab the cube and drag it to the side of the drawing. Click to confirm. Now press numpad 3 to switch to side. Press G again to grab the cube and move it just behind the floating lines. Now you go back to perspective. You already know that when you press Shift right click on the screen, you move the 3D cursor in space. But if you do that, if you press Shift right click over a 3D object, the 3D cursor will stick to the surface of that object. So now each time we need to edit the floating lines here in the drawing, we just need to press Shift right click on the front of this cube and the cursor will move at the right place. And if you want to have more cubes as references for other places, while we are still in object mode, we select the little cube, we press Shift D to duplicate it and drag it somewhere in a place where we'll need to draw later. At this point you still need to rotate to side and to front to adjust the position of your cubes, but once we are all placed, you just need to Shift right click on them to move the 3D cursor. Now I can go back in draw mode. I press Shift right click on this cube, the 3D cursor has moved here with the canvas and I can draw here, and you see I did this without leaving the pen tool. Now you probably guessed that if you render the scene, the cubes will appear, and we don't want that, so we're going to configure the scene to hide them in the final artwork render. In the outliner, here these little eye icons just allow you to hide the objects in the viewport, but not in the render. To really hide the 3D objects, we need to use the collection system of Blender. The collections are some kind of advanced layers or groups for 3D objects. They can be used for very cool, complex compositing stuff, but for now, we are just going to use them for our cubes. So, hover on an empty space in the outliner. You can stretch the panel if you don't have enough space at the bottom. And on the empty space, right-click and under Collection, select New. We have a new collection now. Double-click on the name to rename it. You can name it Help and select the cubes in the outliner. You can press Shift to click on multiple objects. Now drag all the cubes inside the new collection, and on the collection name, right-click and set visibility, disable in render. So for now, the cubes still appear in the viewport, but when we render, we don't see them anymore. In the same way as we've placed this little cube on the left as a reference to draw on the front 14 lines, we're gonna place another cube to draw on the side and top of a drawing. I'm gonna reuse that cube on the right that I've created for the example. So, in object mode, select the cube on the right, press numpad 1, press G and move the cube to the top corner. Now press numpad 3 and press G again to move the cube behind the lines. If you press G and then Z, you can constrain the grab tool to the Z axis. This works on all the 3D transform tools and works with the keys X, Y and Z. Check the perspective now, the cube should be behind the top right corner of a drawing. If we press Shift right click on the side or the top of the box, we place the 3D cursor either on the side or the top of the juice box. So now that we are still on object mode, we can select our grease pencil object either on the scene or in the outliner. And now in our grease pencil object, we switch to draw mode. So let's create two new layers for the side, one for the line art and one for the color. The 3D cursor is on the side of a box now. We changed the orientation rule of the canvas to side, and now we can draw. We can even draw from this angle. And remember, the size of the canvas is infinite, so you can go beyond the grid. And to draw with more accuracy, I still prefer to switch to the side, so I press numpad 3 and trace my lines. Now check the perspective. And if it's okay, place the 3D cursor on the top by pressing Shift right click on the top face of the cube. You can actually use the line art layer or the side to draw also on the top. It all depends if you want to create separate animations for them. In this case, I won't animate the borders of the cube, so I'm going to let the top drawing and side drawing in the same line art layer. So with the 3D cursor still on the top face, change the orientation rule of the canvas to top, and now a new shortcut To see your drawing from the top without perspective, press numpad 7. And here you can draw the top rectangle of the box. Remember the tools, you can use the line or rectangle tool too here, or do it by hand. And you can switch to sculpt mode to adjust the shape if needed. And well, I really need it now. Of course, when you're using the sculpt tool here, check on the drop down over the view that the orientation rule is still set to top. Because if you sculpt with the wrong orientation, like here I set it to front, this is what happens to the lines. And it doesn't matter if you rotate the camera when you sculpt, the only thing that matters is the setting of that drop down at there. Now let's see if all the lines are correctly connected. That top left corner is wrong. I can be sure that the top rectangle is correct because I drew it while the canvas was resting flat on the top. So the problem is the front drawing. So I'm gonna lock all the layers except the line art and color layers of the front drawings. I switch to sculpt mode. I set the tool orientation to front, of course, and I push all this stuff up there. Now it's almost good, just that little line overlapping on the left is the top drawing that is too big, so I'm gonna lock this time all the layers of the foreground stuff, and I unlock the layers of the top rectangle. In this case, I'm gonna use the edit mode. It's a whole line to move from left to right, so the grab tool would just make a mess here, so I will take the selection tool, and I select the line on the left with a piece of the top corner. And before moving the lines to the right, I'm gonna shrink the width a little by pressing S to resize and then X to constrain the transform to the X axis. If you look on the top of my selection, you see the point stretching or contracting when I resize the shape. I prefer to resize instead of just moving everything to the right because I don't want to have these points colliding with the rest on the right. It wouldn't create any bug on the file if these points are colliding, but I'm just a maniac about these points sometimes, so I shrink everything and I can press G to move the lines to the right. We can now go back to draw mode, and after selecting the layer for the side colors, we can paint the top face with the bucket tool. Now some weird stuff. If you rotate to the back, you see the front drawing appearing over the top surface. Actually, for each grease pencil object, you can choose between two modes for the depth of the drawing lines. The first mode is like in the other 2D drawing softwares. The layers appear in the order of the list. So here, the layers of the top and side of the drawing are at the bottom of the list. That's why you can see the front drawing overlapping. If you don't want that, you can switch to the second mode. Still in the layers panel here, open the strokes part and switch the stroke depth order from 2D layers to 3D location. Now the layers order don't matter anymore. The face on the scene appear as normal as real-world physics faces. But this means that, look at the front drawing here, we have these glitches on some colors. That's because we drew different color layers on the exact same place in space, and that's not possible in the real world. So, to solve this, when you choose this 3D location mode on the stroke depth order, you have to move a little bit the colors of your drawing so that they are not exactly in the same plane. You can switch to edit mode and select some colors and move them with pressing G and then Y to constrain the movement to the Y axis. For this artwork, we won't need to do this because the camera movement won't be too crazy. We will always see the box from the side and from the top, so we can switch back the stroke depth order to 2D layers. Now we're going to paint the side, so shift right click on the side of the box and switch back to draw mode. Pick a color, change the orientation rule to side, and then again with the paint bucket tool, fill the side rectangle. This is it. Now you know how to draw a complete 3D object with the drawing tools. So now you should know how to draw some decorations on the side and on the top. Remember to use the little cube on the top right corner to switch the cursor at the right or the top and change the orientation rule of the canvas. I let you choose your own drawings. And remember, if you are going to animate some parts separately from the rest, put them in different layers again, another line art layer and another color layer. You can even reuse the technique of a little cube on the front to draw some little drawings outside of a cube. Here, as an example, I'll duplicate one of the cubes, I place it outside on the right, I place the 3D cursor there and I draw new stuff floating here on the side that I will animate later. Now we're going to add more grease pencil objects in a different way because this one is in the shape of the box, is conveniently aligned with the orthogonal space, but we can create other ones that are oriented in different directions. Let's create, for example, the straw over the box. We must now find a place in space where we will put the center of that next grease pencil object. It will be on the top left of a juice box. So still in object mode, switch to numpad 1 and place the cursor to the left. I'll just hide the canvas temporarily. Now switch to numpad 7 to adjust the position of the cursor to the top. We'll put it in this circle here. Check the perspective. Okay, now select Add Grease Pencil Blank and a new drawing was created. This drawing won't need any helper cubes because it will just contain two simple layers, so to move the cursor at their place to edit them later, we just have to press Shift S and set cursor to selected object and it will go here at the origin of this drawing. In the outliner, check that the new grease pencil object is inside the normal collection, not the one with the helper boxes. If it's outside, you can just click on it and drag it in the right collection. We will rename it Straw. Rename also the nested object inside in green to find it later in the timeline. Now switch to draw mode. Reactivate the canvas in the overlays if it's hidden and check that the orientation rule is set to side. Okay, now let's add the colors in this grease pencil object. In the materials panel you can reuse the colors of the other drawings, so instead of clicking on new, click on the gray sphere icon and here you will find the list of the colors or materials that you already created before. So here pick the line art material. This color is now shared between the two drawings, so if you change it here, it will also change on the other drawing. Now go to the layers panel and create a layer for the line art. I'll name it Lines to not confuse it with the brush color that was named Line Art. Now we can draw the lines on the canvas. We're gonna need a fill color now, so back to the materials panel, click on plus to add a slot for a new color, and again, instead of new, click on the gray sphere to pick an existing color. Of course, if you don't find a color that you like here, you can click on new instead. Just be sure to uncheck the stroke option and just activate the fill color with a color of your choice. Then back to layers, add a layer for colors, rename it and move it at the bottom. Now you might think that you can use the paint bucket here to color this straw, but actually there's a hole in the bottom. If I hide the other grease pencil objects, you see the shape of your drawing here. So now with the paint bucket tool, you know how to fix this. Hold Ctrl and draw a shape to fill the gap. Release Ctrl and click on the rest to paint automatically. And I think I'm gonna adjust the color of this little straw a little. Okay, seems better for me. We are now going to rotate this straw. As I told you, no more drawings aligned with the orthogonal space now. Switch to object mode and without deselecting the current grease pencil object, press R to rotate it and Z to constrain the rotation to a vertical axis. As you can see, the canvas rotates with the drawing. If you rotated this drawing while you were in draw mode or edit mode or sculpt mode, the canvas would have stayed in the same axis as in the beginning, so to make further modifications on the straw, it would have been impossible to find the right angle to redraw the exact lines. So the trick is to go out of the object by switching to object mode, then select it and apply a 3D rotation on the whole thing. Now if you want to edit the drawing, you will just need to go back to draw mode, and if you set the orientation rule to front, the canvas doesn't rotate to the front, but it rotates here at 45 degrees approximately. It's because this is now the front of this drawing. And if you switch the orientation rule to the side, the canvas is now aligned with the shape of the straw. We can do this for more objects now. So back in object mode, place the cursor anywhere in space, like here for example. Select Add Grease Pencil Blank. Check that it's in the right collection. Give it a name. I rename it Candy and rename also the object inside. And in the Layers panel, add a layer for the lines and a layer for the colors, and in the materials panel, import the existing line art color, and import also 2 or more colors or create new colors if you want. Now let's draw the lines. Check the perspective occasionally and use the sculpt tool to adjust the shape if needed. Now in object mode, select the drawing, press R and then Z to rotate on the Z axis, or you can also use the X or Y keys if you want. Once you've rotated the object, switch to draw mode to paint the drawing. Of course, check that you're in the right layer with the right color, and also check that the canvas is in the right orientation. So now you know how to do this for as many objects as you want. Back to object mode, place the cursor somewhere, add grease pencil blank object, place it in the right collection, rename the 2 nested objects, switch to draw mode, import or create colors, create 2 layers for line art and color, draw, paint, go back to object mode, rotate, and voila! Later we are going to duplicate these 2 guys on the front and just change the colors and the rotations to have more objects floating around the box. But for now, let's organize our layers to prepare the animation. Here on object mode, if you select the box and press G to grab it, you see the straw staying at the same place. So in the outliner, select the straw, drag it over the juice box. Don't release the mouse before I tell you, just stay over the juice box, named box here, hold shift, and as you see, the object below is highlighted and the tooltip says trap to set parent. So release the mouse and release the shift key. Now the straw object is inside the box object in the outliner, so when we drag an object here and press shift, we set the object below as its parent. So now if you select the box in the viewport and press G, the straw moves with the box. In the next part, we're going to see how to animate this box, and we'll also animate these little candies here, and we will create copies of it with variations in their colors and animations. At this point, we can already export this as a file. We're just going to adjust the camera position and see the render section. If you already know how to do this, you can skip to the next part, the animation part. So thank you for watching the first video. See you in the next part. And for the beginners, now I'm going to show you. If you go in the animation tab up here, on the left side you have a preview of the render. It will be the exported image on your computer, and on the right side you have a global view of the scene as we saw before. Also, if you're in draw mode here, you have to scroll to find the last part of this menu, so it's better to be in object mode here. And to see the final render colors, just click on the last sphere in this list. On the right part, you can select the camera. It's this object here. If you don't find it, just zoom out. And if you select the camera and press G, you can grab it and see the result on the left in real time. You can also rotate it and do all the transformations we did before on the other objects. If you accidentally rotate the view on the left part, you go out of the camera view. So to go back to the camera, just press numpad 0. Of course, the numpad shortcuts also work on the right part if you prefer to move the camera in orthogonal view. Once you've placed the camera, just press render and render image, and after a few seconds you will see the image in a pop-up, so you can just press image, save as, and choose a directory and a name for your file. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching this first part, and see you in the second part for the animation.